Once upon a time, as it so often is in stories like this, there was a king and a queen who desperately wanted a child. And one day, through a course of events, the queen met a wise old egg woman who knew a bit of magic. And she told the queen, if you really want a child, what you must do is bathe and then throw the bathwater underneath the bed. In the morning, you will find two flowers growing, one rare and one fair. The rare one you must leave, and the fair one you must eat. So the queen took her bath, and she tossed the bathwater under the bed, and in the morning, just as the wise egg woman had said, she found two flowers, one rare and one fair. She ate the fair one, and it was the most delicious thing she had ever tasted, and she thought to herself, surely no harm can come from eating the other one. So she ate both. And, in due course, she found that she was pregnant, and she gave birth, not to one child, but to twins. The first, however, came out riding a goat, wielding a wooden spoon, and she had a tattered hood that she wore. "Heaven help me if I'm your mother," said the queen, but Tatterhood, which is what she was always called, said, "Don't worry, the next one will be much fairer." And sure enough, she was. There was one rare sister and one fair sister, but they were the best of friends. And everything in their life was quite normal, or as normal as it can be if a princess in the palace rides her goat around up and down the halls. Until one day, it was Christmas Eve, I think, and all of a sudden, trolls began to invade the palace. Tatterhood said, "We must stop them." But the king and the queen said, no, they come every 12 years. The math doesn't make sense, but whatever. And there's nothing we can do about it. We must simply barricade ourselves in our chambers. So they barricaded themselves, but Tatterhood couldn't stand it, and she set out to do something, riding on her goat, wielding her wooden spoon. But she gave the servants strict instructions to take care of her fair sister and not let her so much as peek out into the hallway. And then Tatterhood set to riding her goat up and down the hall and whacking trolls with her wooden spoon so that they cried and ran. But her sister was terribly worried about Tatterhood, and when no one was watching, she opened the door and popped her head out, and just like that, the trolls made their mischief. They took her own sweet head off, and they put a cow's head in its place. "Meh, meh," said the fair sister, and she began going about on all fours. Now, when Tatterhood had finished ridding the castle of the trolls, she was very upset to discover that her orders hadn't been followed. She decided that they must travel the world in search of a cure. So she convinced the king and the queen to give her a ship. She refused any crew, and she and her sister set sail. They sailed off for the land of the trolls. And when they reached it, she told her fair sister with the cow's head to stay on the ship while she rode her goat up to their cave, and sure enough, there was her sister's own pretty head stuck to the wall, as you might have a hunting trophy. She rode right in, snatched it down, and began laying to with the wooden spoon, and as you can imagine, she made her escape. As soon as she switched the head, her sister was back to her normal self. But they thought, we've come this far, it would be a shame to go home now. Let's go and see something of the world. So they sailed on, and at last they came to an interesting-looking port. They docked their ship, and they waited. Now, the messengers at the palace were sent down and asked who was on board. And all they saw at first was a strange young woman in a tattered hood riding about on her goat, waving a wooden spoon this way and that. But she informed them that she did have a sister with her. "Will you come up to the palace and meet the king and his sons?" "No," said Tatterhood, "they may come down and meet us here." It was unusual, but the older prince was quite curious. And he insisted that the younger prince come down. The younger prince was not terribly interested, but they did ride down, and they met Tatterhood and her fair sister, who has no name in this story, and invited them to come up to the palace. And because, of course, the elder prince was in love with Tatterhood's sister. And by the looks she was giving him, she felt the same way. The younger brother was not at all pleased to be riding alongside Tatterhood. He was well bred. He had been trained in etiquette, but even he couldn't help himself. At last he burst out and said, "Why do you ride upon a goat?" "Oh, is it a goat?" said Tatterhood. And she touched the wooden spoon to the goat, and it transformed into a beautiful horse, a beautiful silver mare. "Oh," said the prince, and they rode on for a bit longer. But at last the awkward silence grew, and he said, Why do you carry a wooden spoon?" "Is it a wooden spoon?" she said. She gave a flick of her wrist, and the wooden spoon transformed into a wand of rowan wood. "I see," he said. Why do you ride about with a tattered hood?" he asked, finally. "Is it a tattered hood?" said Tatterhood, and she touched the tip of the wand to her cloak and was instantly clad in a beautiful green kirtle. The prince only smiled. They rode, and when they came almost up to the palace gate, Tatterhood said, "Don't you wish to know why my face is covered with dirt and soot?" "No," said the prince. "It is obvious to me that that is how you wish it to be, and if you want to change it, you will do so in your own time." Tatterhood smiled back at him, touched the tip of the wand to her face, and rode through just as beautiful, but still quite rarer than her sister. It's not really how it ends. It's not a competition between the girls, but I do love Tatterhood. I love that she's just so sassy, doesn't care. I wonder, how did it work for her to come out riding a goat? Her poor mother.